here by having a definition for what the mind is and how it's different to the brain.
Sure. Well, at a basic level, we are all having experiences. You are seeing me, I am seeing you. We are having thoughts, we are having feelings. Those experiences are certainly our mind, right? And our experiences are not physical. You cannot touch them. But then also, we have a body, we have a brain. So, in effect, the way scientists, neuroscientists think about this is that the nervous system processes information, much like a computer processes information. The hardware is distinct from the software. So, in that sense, they're distinct. The broad definition of mind is all the information represented by a nervous system, some fraction of which is the basis of our conscious experiences. Where it gets really interesting is when you realize that all mental activity, all of our thoughts, all of our desires, our hopes and our sorrows, all of that requires underlying neural activity. They co-occur, right? They co-occur. And because mental activity enlists neural activity to represent it, the mind has a causal force of its own. The mind matters in its own right. It doesn't just reduce to the meat. And this means that since repeated patterns of mental activity involve repeated patterns of neural activity, repeated patterns of neural activity leave lasting physical traces behind as durable changes of neural structure and function. This means that we have the power, every one of us has the power, to use our minds to change our brains, to change our minds for the better, to help ourselves and everyone else on the planet.
Oh, that's beautiful. Um, that brings me to really nicely into the notion of suffering. Since we
Mm,
have a choice of how we use our brain and our minds
yeah.
to try to foster greater joy, let's talk about what's at the real root of suffering.
Well, it's very deep. So I'm really appreciate you starting there because in part, some of what I might talk about could be misunderstood as just positive thinking, and it's not that at all. We must begin with suffering. Uh, I think there are two kinds of suffering. There is inevitable, inescapable suffering, the physical discomfort of a brick falling on your foot or illness. Then there's inherent emotional suffering when you care about people who are being mistreated and it wounds your heart. Or someone is mean to you. Of course, you're going to react to that. That's the first kind. But then there's the second kind of suffering that we add to inevitable, inescapable suffering of life. We add our reactions to what's happening. And also, often things are basically fine, but we get all messed up in our head about it, all driven or neurotic or anti, blah. I speak from some personal experience here, right? This is the second kind, which is arguably the bulk of our suffering. And on the one hand, because it's what we create ourselves, because of our habits, our reactions. Understandably, I'm a longtime therapist. We acquire tendencies in our childhood. Maybe we've been traumatized. We bring that to bear. But it's poignant that we add it. And it also is hopeful because it means that if we are the cause of it, we can be the cause of its end. And so there's some major aspects of the suffering we create ourselves. Maybe we'll talk about. I'll just say a particular quick thing, which is one of the things that can help us suffer less is to grow psychological resources inside ourselves, like grit or gratitude or compassion or self-worth. Also, obviously, if we can improve the world, we will suffer less. Many
Mm.
people suffer unnecessarily because of poverty, racism, injustice of all kinds, sexism, every kind of stuff. And so it's important both to take action out in the world as well as action in our physical bodies to have good food, have good water, and so forth, and also inside our mind. I focus on the mind. I'm a psychologist, and also because I think the mind is full of opportunity, and you take the benefits wherever you go, no matter what setting you're in. But meanwhile, yes, let's do what we can to help the world become a better place for everybody.